Hi folks, and welcome to another video from APlaneTruth.Info. This is to go in concert with last night's video on the generals in the White House and the satanic symbolism behind it all. And we're going to start off tonight with all the Russian noise going on. Why is all the Russian noise going on, and with Flynn having to resign and the Trump sons having contacts, and why is this? Well, this goes all the way back to America with a K, a mini-series. It was over 14¼ hours back in 1987 on ABC Broadcasting News. It had a bunch of top players, Chris Christopherson at the time, Muriel Hemingway, Robert Ulrich. Anyway, it was described as the most ambitious American mini-series ever. It aired for 14½ hours over 7 nights in a row, February 15th, and reportedly cost $40 million to produce. Back then, that was a lot of money. The idea was, let's have a movie called In Red America. It would be about a few days or weeks in the life of several American families after the Soviet Union had taken over America. Here's the characters. Devin Milford played a maverick politician before the Soviet occupation who ran for president in 1988 after the Soviet takeover began. This movie actually is about 10 years after the U.S. had been occupied by the Soviet Union. Colonel Andrei Denisov of the KGB is a Soviet administrator for the American Central Administrative Area. He is romantically involved, blah, blah, blah. General Petya Samanov, the Soviet military leader in charge of the United States. Peter Bradford, played by Robert Ulrich, a county administrator in Nebraska who cooperates with the Soviets, the Soviet co-ops, to create a better life for his community. The human drama of these character interests with the political intrigue of the Soviet plans for the breakup of the United States. Toward the end of the 1980s, as the decline of the Soviet Union puts it in danger of losing the Cold War, the Soviet leadership makes a desperate gamble to rearrange the global balance of power. 4 large thermonuclear weapons are detonated in the ionosphere of the United States. The resulting electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, destroys the nation's communications and computer systems, cripples the U.S. electrical grid, and affects any equipment that relies on computer technology. Hello, smartphones! Such as the most late model automobiles. With its ICBMs inoperative and the National Command Authority unable to contact U.S. military forces abroad to their foreign allies in Western Europe to launch a counterattack. So the U.S. is forced to accept Soviet terms to surrender in unilateral disarmament, the end of the dollar as a reserve currency, and integration into the Soviet military economic bloc. The United States quickly falls under Soviet military occupation under the command of Russian General Petya Samanov, and the U.S. President and U.S. Congress become more figureheads for their Soviet overseers. This is after they took out Congress. This created the premise for all United States citizens to give over their power to the Soviet Union. Since everybody that votes thinks that Congress is going to fix all their problems, or the president, when that figurehead is taken away and they're the ones providing our power, our utility, and our water, the people of the United States are helpless to take care of themselves, and they too must have surrendered to the Russians. So this may be one of the options they have, is to create the Soviet backdrop to create a coup in the United States, and then the holy war with the Christians just ramps everything up. Islam is taken out, and we have our crusade going well into decades and decades ahead. So here is the Trump inauguration, and of course they have the military that are the dogs of war. That's why they give them dog tags. They're soldiers. They're sold to die. While thinking they're protecting us, they're really serving the satanic element, as I documented in the last video. So here you see the Washington obelisk, the male phallic symbol, sticking right between the two military. We're protecting our maleness. Symbology is everything.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones, and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. There should be no fear. We are protected and we will always be protected. We will be protected by the great men and women of our military and law enforcement. And most importantly, we will be protected by God.
You did tell me.
Because they say it does work. It does work.
Mr. President,
now, personally,
Mr. President, you told me during one of the debates that you would bring back waterboarding and a hell of a lot worse.
I would do what I would do. I want to keep our country safe. I want to keep our country safe.
What does that mean?
When they're shooting, when they're chopping off the heads of our people and other people, when they're chopping off the heads of people because they happen to be a Christian.
So I said to him, they're decapitating people. They're drowning people, and they're chopping off heads.
It's been that way for a long time. In Syria, you have the Christians where their heads are being chopped off randomly and at will, and you have the Muslims who are not in Syria. You have to knock out ISIS. They're chopping off heads. These are animals. You have to knock them out. You have to knock them off strong. They're chopping off people's heads in the Middle East, especially if you happen to be Christian. They're chopping off heads, and she's the other side. They chop off our young people's heads.
I said, we are living in a world where in the Middle East they're cutting people's heads off. They're chopping a Christian's head off, and many of them. We talk about, I don't want ISIS. ISIS is bad, they're evil. When they start doing with the head chopping and drowning thing where they could chop off heads.
We will chop off the heads of the Americans, chop off the heads of the French, chop off the heads of whoever you may bring.
So we can't do waterboarding. But they can do chopping off heads, drowning people in steel cages. They can do whatever they want to do.
A conspiracy to start a war so that the Antichrist can ascend to his position as world ruler. Pike's letter ironically also detailed the specifics of the first two wars with stunning accuracy, suggesting that he knew before time the details surrounding each of the wars. World War I, according to Pike, would be fought to overthrow the czars in Russia and change Russia into a communist state. The Second World War would be fought for two reasons: to establish the State of Israel and to expand communist control over Europe. The Third World War will be what allows the Novus Ordo Seclorum to rise out of the dust. According to Pike, Islam will be the central factor in the downfall of the West. Islam will be decimated in the process, allowing for the new religion of pure Luciferianism to spread on the earth.
The president was one of those Americans who went to church, but he spent a lot of the time this weekend meeting with advisors at the presidential retreat Camp David. When he returned to the White House, he spoke to the media.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
The Holy Father has ordered us here. He has promoted you in absentia to the rank of Archbishop, as befits your task. Congratulations, Your Grace. We, the faithful here assembled, form the Knights of the Ninth Crusade. We are yours to command, Archbishop Maxwell. Employ us as you will.
In 1717, the Templars made their reappearance in Europe. They had grown in both number and strength, and were now ready to coin a new identity, free from their reputation of the past, and given credibility by none other than the monarchy and aristocracy of England. And the name they chose for themselves was a name that will be known by many, but understood by a few. This new name, the Freemasons. 20 years after Jerusalem was taken, the Dome of the Rock was seized by a group of warrior monks calling themselves the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or more simply, the Knights Templars. In Jerusalem, the Templars began to deviate further and further away from the practices of Christianity. They learnt the secret arts of the Kabbalah, an ancient form of Jewish magic, along with its dark rites and rituals. The Jews had learnt the arts from the pagans of ancient Egypt during the times of enslavement to the Pharaoh, and developed them into Babylon at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. In 1307, King Philippe of France arrested them for charges of denial of Christ, homosexuality, and idol worship, as well as magic. In 1314, Pope Clement V declared all Templars as heretics to Christianity, ordering all their properties to be seized. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was captured and burnt to the stake. The Templars were cornered, and just when it seemed they were finished forever, a glimmer of hope arose from a seemingly certain end. They were to find a safe haven as well as an ally. But not in France. In fact, in a country in a desperate struggle for independence against the English. The country of Scotland.
Pike was Grand Master of a Luciferian group known as the Order of Palladium Sovereign Council of Wisdom, which had been founded in Paris in 1737. He enticed an American occultist and Freemason named Albert Pike into joining the upper echelon of the Illuminati. When invited by Mazzini, he readily agreed to join. Pike was then made head of the Illuminati operations in the United States. Mazzini could sense an extra powerful occult nature about Pike and tasked him to write an occultic book that guided the transition from average high-ranking Mason into top-ranking Illuminati Mason, that of the 33rd degree. Pike then penned what is considered the modern-day Freemasonic Bible called Morals and Dogma. This book was used by the Illuminati as a Pied Piper to bring Freemasonic lodges in the United States under their control, where before the Illuminati had operated mainly out of the Columbia Lodge. Albert Pike is known for a few other things as well. He is a Confederate general and a founding member of the KKK. But I also think it's pretty odd that Albert Pike is the only Confederate general with an honorary statue on federal property in Washington, D.C. But he was not honored for being a commander or even as a lawyer, but for being the southern regional leader of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The statue stands on a pedestal near the foot of the Capitol Hill between the Department of Labor building and the Municipal building between 3rd and 4th Streets on D Street Northwest. Palladism had been brought into the Great Plan from Egypt by Pythagoras in the 5th century BC, and it was the cult of Satan that was introduced in the inner circles of the Masonic lodges in the early 1800s. You can follow the existence of the Illuminati through the 1800s and early 1900s through the Library of Congress. Just go to the Library of Congress website and search Illuminati, and it'll bring up hundreds of old newspapers where you can follow the timeline of their recruitment centers through Masonic lodges and other organizations. In 1967, Jewish broadcaster Myron C. Fagan described with documentary evidence how the Illuminati became the instrument of the House of Rothschild to achieve a one-world government, and how every war during the past 2 centuries was fomented by this Illuminati. He describes how one Jacob H. Schiff was sent to the United States by the Rothschilds to further the Illuminati plot, and how Schiff plotted to get control of both the Democrat and Republican parties. How Schiff seduced our Congress and our presidents to achieve control of our entire money system and create the income tax cancer, and how Schiff and his co-conspirators created the Council of Foreign Relations to control our elected officials to gradually drive the U.S. into becoming an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government.
So city landmarks and icons represent intention. So here we see Albert Pike in Washington, D.C., and this is a very large statue in a beautiful area looking down on maybe Persephone or someone that's been conquered, and their flag and being draped over. Now this statue was erected by the Supreme Council of AASR Freemasonry. It's the only statue of a Confederate general in a city filled with statues of Civil War generals. Looking further, the handsomest man in the Southwest. During the Civil War, Pike trained and led 3 regiments of Native American, notice they don't say Indians, Confederate cavalry at the Battle of Pea Ridge. He was a Klansman. It's widely believed that Albert Pike organized and led the Arkansas Ku Klux Klan, documented in the book 1924 book Authentic History of Ku Klux Klan. General Albert Pike, he was a Satanist. Pike's obscure books on Masonic ritual have not escaped controversy either. Here's your 33 degrees, the double head you see in Hitler, double head you see everywhere of the eagles. We'd have to look up what that means. So Mr. Pike in his Freemason regalia has been portrayed as advocating the worship of Lucifer and hence Satan. This man has a mausoleum in Washington, D.C. He says, maintain the purity of the Luciferian doctrine, 33-degree Freemason. The fruits of his labor live after him. In the home, he was buried in the Supreme Council at 433 3rd Street. Get it? 433 3rd Street. All right, this is where it gets good. So Pike's remains were moved in December of 1944. What happened in 1944, folks? June 6th was D-Day, World War II, the Battle of Normandy, with the landing of 155,000 Allied troops on the beaches of Normandy, France. And this is when they moved Mr. Pike, fulfilling the prophecy. The vault is in the wall behind this memorial bust. They put a total monument in Washington, D.C. to this guy. The Jesuits. All right? That's why this guy is important. Now, he is saying that they need to eradicate all Muslims. That's what this video doc is about. But after that, they're coming after all heretics and Christians. It's a war on all to end all. This is their prophecy. They're fulfilling it. We got to wake up fast or protect our loved ones as best we can. It's the Christians too, folks. They're playing you. They're playing all of us. That's why I want us all to work together and love one another.
12 ayes, 11 nays.
The ayes have it. The nomination will be favorably reported.
Breaking right now at noon, a Senate committee just voting to recommend Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Shaw.
I'm Emily Leonard. This vote just happened within the past 15 minutes in Washington.
We are joined right now by our political reporter, Rick Albin, for a look at what happened today and what happens next.
This has been a very tumultuous 11 days of the Trump administration.
Fairly well known in Republican circles. She's a big party donor. She served as the former finance chair of the RNC. She was chair of the Michigan Republican Party. Also one of the country's leading advocates for school vouchers. She's also the sister of Eric Prince. Remember Eric Prince? That name sounds familiar. It's because he is the guy who founded Blackwater,
a full-fledged criminal enterprise executed by the military contractors known formerly as Blackwater, according to the sworn testimony of two of its employees. The Nation's Jeremy Scahill, who broke the story, joins us in a moment. The details come straight from two sworn affidavits filed late last night by persons whose identities have been sealed to protect their identity, men who have previously cooperated with federal prosecutors in the criminal inquiry into Blackwater. John Doe number 2 also stating that Mr. Prince, pictured here, smuggled unlawful weapons into Iraq, including sawed-off semi-automatic machine guns with silencers and illegal hand grenades. And the affidavit also says that Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe. Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe.
Against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth.
To that end, Mr. Prince intentionally deployed to Iraq certain men who shared his vision of Christian supremacy. Many of these men used Mr. Prince operated his companies in a manner that encouraged and rewarded the destruction of Iraqi life. Going to Iraq to shoot and kill Iraqis was viewed as a sport or game. Call signs based on the Knights of the Templar, the warriors who fought the Crusades.
You provide the leadership, communications, intelligence, medical, and logistics support to that unit, and they can stop the refugees.
Mr. Prince, given the legacy of the work that Blackwater did in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and the issues that were fleshed out by some of those involved with the company, do you have any regrets about the work there?
I have great regrets for ever going to work for the State Department. We did exactly the mission they asked us to do. We did more than 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured. And the men used their firearms in less than 0.5% of all those missions, while doing the most dangerous personal security detail missions in the world.
So as Pope Francis pontificates, like all the other popes before him, about helping the poor and taking care of the poor, when the Vatican is the richest country in the world, you can see how it trickles down here. The quote from Francis is what everybody sees. Hey, I'm a champion of the poor. Oh, but he had to fire a German bishop who spent $43 million to remodel his pad. But it's right in line with what's going on in the United States. Timothy Dolan, the controller of presidents of the United States there for years now, the Archbishop of New York, has found that 10 of 34 active archbishops have buildings worth more than $1 million. Cardinal Timothy Dolan packs a 15,000 square foot mansion in Manhattan, in the priciest neighborhood in the city, worth at least $30 million. But then we go to Cardinal Francis George, got a pretty fancy crib himself. He's got 19 chimneys. It gets cold there when you're pontificating and you're trying to help the poor. It sits on 1.7 prime acres in the ritzy Gold Coast neighborhood and is worth $14.3 million as is. So these guys talk one thing, preach one thing, yet practice something completely something else, and that's lifestyles of the rich and priestly.
New York's Catholic Archbishop is among 22 men elevated to cardinal by Pope Benedict Saturday. Timothy Dolan smiled broadly as he approached the Pope. It came a day after he received a heartfelt papal thumbs up for his animated speech to cardinals about spreading the faith.
He said, well, thank you again for yesterday. I said, thank you for this. Let us pray. God of our ancestors and Lord of mercy, you have made all things, and in your providence have charged us to rule the creatures produced by you. You have made all things, and in your providence have charged us to rule the creatures produced by you, and short-lived, lacking in comprehension of judgment and of laws. Indeed, though one might be perfect among mortals, if wisdom which comes from you be lacking, we count for nothing.
Tell us what you think about this today. Good to meet you.
Nice here. Nice to be here and nice to see you. And my name is Philip Thomas. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I lived in many parts of the world. I lived in Muslim countries, and I know how human rights are being violated, and people of other religions are treated like dirt. And this country, it's a great country. For the past 8 years, we had a nightmare with Obama. And that nightmare is over today. Yeah. As the other brother, the African-American brother said, a lot of quotation he gave from the Bible. You read Daniel chapter 2, you'll find God is the installer and God is the remover of kings. Today, God had installed Mr. Trump as the president of this country.
That's right, we voted.
Warning, bullshit alert. That was bullshit. Bullshit detected. Take precaution.
With this symbolic military salute, the former Superior General of the Jesuits, Adolfo Nicolas, handed the baton to the next leader of the Society of Jesus, the Venezuelan Arturo Sosa.
It has long been a tradition for a newly elected Superior General to meet with the Pope. It's an opportunity for His Holiness to speak with the Superior of the Society of Jesus to offer wisdom and counsel, and for the Jesuit General to ensure that his leadership is in line with that of the Pontiff. This morning, Pope Francis graced General Congregation 36 with his presence. From a non-discrepant vehicle and with no entourage, Pope Francis emerged at the Jesuit Curia to speak first with Father General, then to the delegates and staff of GC36. This wasn't a social call. This was the congregation with newly elected Father General Arturo Sosa presenting themselves before the Bishop of Rome and asking him to guide their discernment towards his vision of the Church. We are the Society of Jesus. We are your servants. We are ready to set the world on fire. Send us. We are the Society of Jesus. We are your servants. we are ready to set the world on fire. Send us.
In his inaugural address, George W. Bush proclaimed that an angel would ride the whirlwind and direct the storm. The master plan was unveiled in 2001 for World War III. They started Albert Pike's blueprint when they flew 2 planes into the World Trade Centers and blamed it on Islam. The storm that would come and the angel that would bring it were long-awaited prophetic fulfillments. And as Albert Pike, Grand Wizard of the craft, had predicted, Islam would be the choice religion to use to foment a crisis between it and the West that would only get worse. What is the common factor every time we see a crisis? Who's behind it? Islam. And they want you to believe it's organically an issue of Islam. This was planned hundreds of years ago. The master plan to use Islam was kicked off in 2001 when the fear of Americans was taken advantage of by an esoteric cabal lurking in the shadows. And they have quite a plan for Islam. The esoteric cabal is using Islam to achieve the great work. It's all been mapped out. We've seen what they're doing with the migrant crisis. We've seen what they've done in England with the Sharia courts, and on and on and on. They're using Islam to stir the pot. The system has to come down. It has to topple. Islam will be used for the ultimate goal, and that is to fully usher in the Luciferian capstone. They're going to keep using it to destroy Western Christianity, Western culture. It's going to happen.
I've got so many questions, but you are vindicated. This has got to be the 50th time the last 6 months on the radical Muslims celebrating, not just in New Jersey, but New York, Palestine, all over.
And the people were saying, many of the people from New Jersey, 4 or 5 people said, Mr. Trump, I saw it myself. I was there. They talked about Patterson, but they said, I saw it myself, Mr. Trump. I was there.
All Muslims will fall for this system. There isn't a single Muslim on earth who will not partake in the religion of the New World Order, according to Pike. Islam is merely a tool to destroy the Christian West. That's it. That's all it is. It's a tool. That's what they said hundreds of years ago.
So the Jesuit extreme oath, fourth vow, I promise, further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals. That's everybody, folks. No Christians are being excluded from their holy war crusade they've begun, starting on 9/11. How the Vatican created Islam. This was by former Jesuit priest Alberto Rivera, who was killed for disclosing this information, according to a lot of sources. He was a Jesuit priest until he renounced and told what he knew for years as a priest in the Society of Jesus. It included access to the secret Vatican libraries. For this he was assassinated, as other former Jesuit priests have been poisoned. Here he discloses how the Vatican created the Islamic religion to destroy Jerusalem and the Jews. Here is a letter from a former high-ranking Jesuit who signed an order to have Alberto Rivera killed until he too denounced his faith in the Jesuits. All right, look at this painting here. This is the destruction of the temple at Jerusalem by Nicolas Poussin in 1637. The great counterfeit religion was Roman Catholicism, called Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, Revelation 17:5. She was raised up to block the gospel, slaughter the believers in Christ, establish religions, create wars, and make the nations drunk with the wine of her fornication, as we will see. Sound familiar? Quote, the Vatican wanted to create a Messiah for the Arabs, someone they could raise up to as a great leader, a man with charisma, whom they could train and eventually unite all the non-Catholic Arabs behind him, creating a mighty army that would ultimately capture Jerusalem for the Pope. The Pope moved quickly and issued bulls granting the Arab generals permission to invade and conquer the nations of North Africa. The Vatican helped to finance the building of these massive Islamic armies in exchange for 3 favors. 1. Eliminate the Jews and Christians, true believers, which they called infidels. 2. Protect the Augustinian monks and Roman Catholics. 3. Conquer Jerusalem for His Holiness in the Vatican. As time went by, the power of Islam became tremendous. Jews and true Christians were slaughtered, and Jerusalem fell into their hands. Roman Catholics were never attacked, nor were their shrines during this time. Just like IG Farben and all the German facilities that Bush Sr. and all those guys had interest in never got bombed during World War II. But when the Pope asked for Jerusalem, he was surprised at their denial. The Arab generals had such military success that they could not be intimidated by the Pope. Nothing could stand in the way of their plan. Same speaking today. What I'm going to tell you is what I learned in secret briefings in the Vatican when I was a Jesuit priest under oath and induction. This is Father Rivera. A Jesuit cardinal named Augustine Bay showed us how desperately the Roman Catholics wanted Jerusalem at the end of the 3rd century. Because of its religious history and its strategic location, the Holy City was considered a priceless treasure. A scheme had to be developed to make Jerusalem a Roman Catholic city. Now, there's also, before that, they raged and pillaged and burned Alexandria, the greatest library of knowledge. Then they took all the information and took it into the Vatican where it's useful, and they burned the rest. And they've held the knowledge ever since, and the story. Quote, the great untapped source of manpower that could do this job was the children of Ishmael. The poor Arabs fell victim to one of the most clever plans ever designed by the power of darkness. In 70 AD, Roman armies under General Titus smashed Jerusalem and destroyed the great Jewish temple, which was the heart of the Jewish worship, in fulfillment of Christ's prophecy in Matthew 24:2. Quote, only this holy place today, where the temple once stood, the Dome of the Rock Mosque, stands as Islam's second most holy place. Sweeping changes were in the wind. The only way Satan could stop this thrust was to create a counterfeit Christian religion to destroy the work of God. The solution was Rome. The religion had to come from ancient Babylon, and all was needed was a facelift. This didn't happen overnight, but began in the writings of the early church fathers. It was through these writings that a new religion would take shape. The statue of Jupiter in Rome was eventually called St. Peter, and the statue of Venus was changed to the Virgin Mary. The site chosen for its headquarters was one of the 7 hills called Vaticanus, the place of the divining serpent where the satanic temple of Janus stood. There's also 7 hills in Washington, D.C., and Capitoline Hill. The Potomac was called the Tiber. It was called Rome, Maryland, right before it was Washington, D.C. We under Roman Latin law. The Vatican, the Holy See, S-E-E, S-E-A, get it? Quote, the great counterfeit religion was Roman Catholicism, called Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of earth, Revelation 17:5. She was raised up to block the gospel, slaughter the believers in Christ, establish religions, create wars, and make the nations drunk with the wine of her fornication, as we shall see. 3 major religions have one thing in common. Each has a holy place where they look for guidance. Roman Catholicism looks to the Vatican as the holy city. The Jews look to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and the Muslims look to Mecca as their holy city. Each group believes, lie, they receive certain types of blessings for the rest of their lives for visiting the holy place. In the beginning, Arab visitors would bring gifts to the house of God, and the keepers of the Kaaba were gracious to all who came. Some brought their idols, not wanting to offend these people. Their idols were placed inside the sanctuary. It is said the Jews looked upon the Kaaba as an outlying tabernacle of the Lord with veneration until it became polluted with idols. So Augustine, Roman Augustine, became the bishop of North Africa and was effective in winning Arabs to Roman Catholicism, including whole tribes. Okay, he's now in North Africa. It was among these Arab converts to Catholicism that the concept of looking for an Arab prophet developed. So here we get started with Muhammad. Quote, Muhammad was with his uncle when a Roman Catholic monk learned his identity and said, quote, take your brother's son back to this country and guard him against the Jews, for by God, if they see him and know of him, that which I know, they will construe evil against him. Great things are in store for this brother's son of yours. The Roman Catholic monk had fanned the flames for future Jewish persecutions at the hands of the followers of Muhammad. The Vatican desperately wanted Jerusalem because of its religious significance, but it was blocked by the Jews. This is propaganda, Roman Catholic Edward Bernays way back then, folks. Propaganda, look at it. Another problem was the true Christians in North of Africa who preached the gospel. Roman Catholicism was growing in power, but both the Jews and the true Christian believers who refused to accept Roman Catholicism. Looking to North Africa, they saw the multitudes of Arabs as a source of manpower to do their dirty work. Some Arabs had become Roman Catholic and could be used in reporting information to leaders in Rome. This is also why they have confessionals, to gather information about you. Others were used in the underground spy network to carry out Rome's master plan to control the great multitudes of Arabs who rejected Catholicism. When St. Augustine appeared to the scene, he knew what was going on. His monasteries served as bases to seek out and destroy Bible manuscripts owned by the true Christians. The Vatican wanted to create a Messiah for the Arabs, someone they could raise up to as a great leader, a man with charisma who they could train and eventually unite all the non-Catholic Arabs behind him, creating a mighty army that would ultimately capture Jerusalem for the Pope. Following up, finally, when Cardinal Bay shared us with the Vatican, he said these writings are guarded because they contain vital information that links the Vatican to the creation of Islam. This is setting the trap. The Pope moved quickly and issued bulls granting the Arab generals permission to invade and conquer the nations of North Africa. The Vatican helped to finance the building of these massive Islamic armies in exchange for 3 favors: eliminate the Jews and Christians, protect the Augustinian monks, and conquer Jerusalem for His Holiness in the Vatican. The Pope realized that they had created was out of control when he heard they were calling His Holiness an infidel. The Muslim generals were determined to conquer the world for Allah, and now they turned toward Europe. Islamic ambassadors approached the Pope and asked for papal bulls to give them permission to invade European countries. Temporal power and control of the world was considered the basic right of the Pope. He wouldn't think of sharing it with those whom he considered heathens. The Pope raised up his armies and called them crusades, sound familiar, to hold back the children of Ishmael from grabbing Catholic Europe. The crusades lasted centuries and Jerusalem slipped out of the Pope's hands. The crusades lasted centuries. Turkey fell and Spain and Portugal were invaded by Islamic forces. In Portugal, they called a mountain village Fatima in honor of Muhammad's daughter, never dreaming it would become world famous. Get it? How they twist the truth, turn positive to negative? Fatima. Years later, when the Muslim armies were poised on the islands of Sardinia and Corsica to invade Italy, there was a serious problem. The Islamic generals, they were too far extended. It was time for peace talks. One of the negotiators was Francis of Assisi. As a result, the Muslims were allowed to occupy Turkey in the Christian world, and the Catholics were allowed to occupy Lebanon in the Arab world. It was also agreed that the Muslims could build mosques in Catholic countries without interference as long as Rome Catholicism could flourish in Arab countries. The Islamic community looks on the Bible-believing missionary as a devil who brings poison to the children of Allah. This explains years of ministry in those countries with little results. The next plan, and the Christians and the Jesuits want to exterminate all heathens and Christians. Back at you. Quote, the next plan was to control Islam. In 1910, Portugal was going socialistic. Red flags were appearing. The Catholic Church was facing a big problem. Increasing numbers were going against the church. The Jesuits wanted Russia involved, and the location of this vision at the Fatima could play a key part in pulling Islam to the Mother Church. Roman Catholics worldwide began praying for the conversion of Russia. Oh, we're praying. And Jesuits invented the novenas to the Fatima, which they could perform throughout North Africa, spreading good public relations in the Muslim world. The Arabs thought they were honoring the daughter of Muhammad, which is what the Jesuits wanted them to believe. Be lie. As a result of the vision of Fatima, Pope Pius XII ordered his Nazi army to crush Russia and the Orthodox religion and make Russia Roman Catholic. A few years later, he lost World War II. Pope Pius XII started the world with his phony dancing sun vision to keep Fatima in the news. It was great religious showbiz, and the world swallowed it. And I'll put this in the show notes.
They've known about this since at least the late 1800s. And even earlier than that, I think. All world wars have been mapped out. The third and the last one was already written in the books. This is a battle between principalities and powers and dominions. And that is why our brother Paul told us to pray and to go to war against those principalities and powers.
We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth.
So let's see what their overall plan is as far as what they hope to accomplish when they're done with these crusades. This is in Albertson County, Georgia, about 2.5 hours northeast of Atlanta, Georgia, the Georgia Guidestones. I highly suggest, if you can, just go out there and see. It's in the middle of a country farm road in Albertson County, and it's on a perch, I guess the little highest point in Albertson County, across from a farm. I did go out there about 3 years ago to see this, and it's very real. They've carved 10 commandments for a New Age reason. The first commandment, maintaining the world population under 500 million people, folks. We're at 7 billion plus 500 million. Do the math. It's like 95% reduction of the population, okay? So the Georgia Guidestones are an enigmatic granite monument situated in Albertson County. It's called the American Stonehenge. It's 20 feet high, actually 19.6 feet, and is made of 6 granite slabs weighing 250,000 pounds. The most astonishing detail of the monument is not, however, but the message engraved. So the monument here, you see at the top, they're talking about the message here. So these are eight sides and 4 at the top. These are in ancient Sanskrit, hieroglyphics, and a couple others we'll get into. And these are 8 common languages. Serious intention was put in here, folks. 1991, R.C. Christian pseudonym was used as the go-front to deal with the officials in the quarry to mount this. So they're meant to withstand the test of time and to communicate knowledge on several levels, philosophically, politically, astronomically. Consists of 4 major stone blocks which contain 10 guides for living in 8 languages. Okay, 10 commandments, 8 languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. A shorter message is inscribed at the top of the structure. That's up here. Okay, big block. This is bigger. This top block is about 2/3 bigger, larger, 1 2/3 than this width here. And it contains the Egyptian, Babylonian, Classic Greek, and Sanskrit languages. So that's what he's talking about right here. So the 4 major stone blocks contain 10 guides. Shorter messages at the top is Babylonian, Classic Greek, Sanskrit, and Egypt. It is important to note that the last 4 ancient languages of great importance in the teachings of occult mystery schools. It's orientated this is the astronomy part. It's orientated at the limits of migration to the sun during the course of a year on a sun's 18.6-year cycle. That's the cycle of, I believe, Saturn. The center stone has 2 special features. First, for the North Star, always visible through a special hole drilled through the south to the north side of the center stone. Second, another slot aligns with the positions of the rising sun at the time of the summer and winter solstice and the equinox. Those are down here, these holes, and you look up. See these viewing lines? Okay, they go up from down here. There's also down in here these slots. There's some writings which I couldn't figure out, and they're about chest high, so you're meant to look in through those. But there were some carvings in the middle of this stone pedal piece in the middle of it all. Very strange. And then they had the astronomical features. Very intentional, serious intention. Okay, the 10 commandments. Maintain humanity under 500 million people. Guide reproduction wisely. Rockefeller Planned Parenthood. Unite humanity with a living new language. Babylonian language. We're babbling on. Rule with passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. So at the top of the stones here, what it says up in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, cuneiform, Greek, and Sanskrit is, let this be the age of reason. Age of reason, the Thomas Paine line. Okay, that's what they're talking about here. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Yeah, Roman Catholic courts. We're already doing that. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. We own your ass. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Rule by technology. Balance personal rights with social duties, obligations, obedience, tithe, taxes. Prize beauty, truth, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Yeah, that's the elite, them. Okay, here we go. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Nature bats last. How do they determine we leave room for nature? Keep it under 500 million people. They have to eliminate 95% of us, folks. Hope you're getting this message. All right, so one other thing I want to bring your attention to is that this site, Zushian Revelations, I've just gotten turned on to, he talked about the Georgia Guidestones, and he says the creator of the Georgia Guidestones, which aimed to regulate the population of humanity, used the name R.C. Christian as an alias, and it was really Robert C. Cook, an American geneticist involved in population control and eugenics. And you can look up his story. New York Times wrote a big article about him. RCC, like the Roman Catholic Church and like the Rosy Cross, the Rosicrucians made a YouTube placing a time cube with MM and 16 on it. It also had 14 on it and a couple others on other sides. MM for 2016 meant 2016. They intended to unleash a fake outbreak in 2016 to bring down the United States and destroy society with their deadly vaccines. The depiction shown of the Ebola virus under a microscope looked like an 2 8s. 8 plus 8 equals 16. Then a Japanese movie called Virus used a virus called MM88 designed by an American eugenicist. Once this was all exposed, the Ebola propaganda ended within a week. They are behind the Zika too. Vaccines are one of the most destructive tools on the wicked use of humanity, and primarily designed to target the nervous system and weaken a person's spiritual armor or electromagnetic shield. The Orsini and Rosenberg families were also responsible for the Black Plague. They hired people to poison well water in order to spread the disease. The song Ring O' Roses goes back to the times of the Black Plague. They used rose petals to mask the smell of death. I also found 2 people in the name Rosenberg that work in high-level positions at Bayer today. That's Bayer Pharmacology that just merged with Monsanto. And here's Guy Hawkes, V for Vendetta, Jesuit plot to overthrow the British Empire with the Red Rose scene. Do you remember in the vaccines when V for Vendetta went back to the lady and put her to death with the Red Rose because they had been using vaccines? Oh my gosh, these guys are bad.
So we can't do waterboarding, but they can do chopping off heads, drowning people in steel cages. They can do whatever they want to do.
Off with their heads! Off with his head! Off with his head! If I lose my temper, you lose your head. Understand? Someone's head will roll for this. Here! Off with her! Off with her! Off with her! Off with her head!
So in closing this up, a very difficult subject. In the knowing is the preparing. To know is to be able to prepare. This was back from February 5th, 2015. 30,000 guillotines in U.S. to kill 30 million people per day. The fearing, but it's true. The whistleblowers include ex-FBI, CIA, NASA, A.C. Griffith. 30,000 modern guillotines. This is how many they were ordered. FEMA ordered 102,000 boxcars with shackles and guillotines. 30,000 guillotines in America. So here you see also all the live ammunition that's being bought from everybody from the U.S. Postal Service. You know, what is this in preparation for? The Walmart underneath closing the Southwest Walmart stores. Jade Helm, that was a year ago. The Zika virus, that was going to be released apparently, according to Zushian Revelations, that the Zika virus was going to be released until a Japanese film on the virus using the MM88 virus they were going to use was made, so they had to cancel it. They even put the cube up in the to call their shot up in the Georgia Guidestones. So this is very real, folks. We're really under attack. They're really coming after us. The United States is not immune, and I really want the Christians to really understand they're not immune either. You know, this is a holy war against them, disguised as a holy war against the Islamic and the radicals and all that we must eradicate, because we know better, and we're better than you. All right, this is this is a plain truth out. Thanks for listening again. I really appreciate all your guys' support in the comments section. We're a growing little nation here of just truth tellers, and I really appreciate all the feedback, and let's just keep doing it. All right, peace out.